The professor's tentacles quivered with glee as he snapped the chalk in half. "Humans," he said, his voice brimming with disdain, "cannot survive more than 10 minutes on Xyrix 9 unless they build an igloo." An igloo, laughable. A low murmur spread through the lecture hall, packed with young alien cadets from across the Coalition's stellar territories. The humans sat in a row near the back, their expressions stoic. To most of the aliens, these Earthlings were an oddity, some kind of cruel cosmic joke, a species that appeared as fragile as they were obstinate. Yet they were allies, if begrudgingly. One of the humans stood. Lieutenant James O'Connell adjusted his jacket, his calm demeanor masking the simmering challenge beneath. He walked to the front of the hall with slow, deliberate steps. Every alien eye followed him, the air thick with expectation. "Professor Grintalk," he said evenly, his voice carrying through the room. "With respect, we don't fail as easily as you think." Grintalk's bulbous head swiveled toward him. "Ah, Lieutenant O'Connell," he sneered, "would you care to demonstrate this mythical human resilience? Or shall we continue theorizing about how your kind's stubbornness fails to match physics?" A ripple of laughter rose among the aliens. O'Connell grinned, unfazed. "I'll take you up on that," he said, "but I'll need two things. 10 minutes in the surface of Xyrix 9. The room fell silent. Grintalk's laughter was slow, building in intensity. "You wish to attempt this in real conditions? You realize the temperatures there reach levels no human can endure?" "Better than chalk and word," O'Connell shot back, "unless you're afraid a fragile human will ruin your argument." The challenge hung in the air. A cadet in the front row whispered something to his neighbor, earning a quick glare from Grintalk. Finally, the professor gestured dismissively. "Fine, but do not expect me to bend protocol for your dramatic flair. You'll receive no assistance. Any tools you use must come from the environment itself." "That's all I need." The Coalition quickly arranged a transport to the planet's surface. The spectacle was too rich to pass up, and cadets filed into observation chambers aboard the orbital station. Betting pools sprang up in seconds, with odds overwhelmingly favoring O'Connell's demise. The humans stayed out of it, silently assembling near the main screen. Private Caleb Brooks, the youngest of the human crew, leaned toward O'Connell as they suited up in the locker room. "Are you really doing this, sir?" "I am. You know Grintalk's just trying to humiliate us, right?" O'Connell nodded. "Let him try. Every once in a while, we've got to remind them why we're here." The shuttle roared to life, and within minutes O'Connell found himself standing on the icy wasteland of Xyrix 9. The wind howled sharp as a blade, and the temperature gauge on his wrist flashed angry warnings. The planet was a sea of white, broken only by jagged, crystalline formations jutting from the ground. There was no shelter, no mercy in sight. "Time starts now, Lieutenant," crackled Grintalk's voice over the comms. "Do entertain us." O'Connell crouched immediately, his gloved hands digging into the snow. The material was finer than he'd expected, closer to powdered glass than anything he'd encountered on Earth. He began carving out chunks, shaping them into compact blocks. The cold bit through his suit as if it wasn't there, but he focused on his task, his breath steady. Back in the observation chamber, Grintalk smirked as he addressed the crowd. "Observe the humans' futile efforts. 10 minutes may as well be 10 lifetimes in those conditions." The aliens murmured in agreement, but the humans exchanged knowing glances. Sergeant Mark Dempsey leaned closer to Brooks. "Bet you 20 he pulls this off." 30, Brooks replied, "but he's cutting it close." On the planet, O'Connell worked with precise movements, stacking the snow blocks into a spiraling dome. His hands trembled from the cold, but he ignored the pain. With each block added, the structure grew more stable. He glanced at his wrist. 4 minutes had passed. The aliens' chatter grew louder as the igloo began to take shape. "How is he still alive?" one cadet whispered. Another replied, "He must be using something from his suit. It's not natural." Grintalk remained unimpressed. "Even if he survives the cold, the structural integrity of that dome is doomed to fail. He's building with substandard materials." On the ground, O'Connell reached the critical final stages of construction. The wind was merciless, threatening to topple the structure at any moment. He worked faster, carving and placing blocks with an almost mechanical efficiency. His fingers burned and his vision blurred from the icy glare. With 30 seconds left, he placed the keystone at the top of the dome. The wind whistled, but the structure held. O'Connell crawled inside, his suit sensors registering an immediate drop in the wind's assault. The temperature inside was still deadly, but manageable. He sat back, letting out a long, visible breath. "Time's up," Grintok announced, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "Let us see the outcome." The camera zoomed in on the Igloo, its compact structure gleaming under the harsh light of the alien sun. Inside, O'Connell raised his hand toward the lens, giving a casual thumbs up. Grintok's smug expression faltered. The observation room erupted into noise, shouts, arguments, and stunned exclamations. The humans exchanged quiet smiles. Dempsey clapped Brooks on the shoulder. "Told you." Back on the surface, O'Connell's comm crackled to life. "Lieutenant," Grintok said, his voice strained, "return to the shuttle for debriefing. This isn't over." "Oh, I'm sure it isn't," O'Connell replied, his breath fogging the air inside the Igloo. "But you might want to update that lecture of yours." Grintok was fuming as the shuttle brought O'Connell back to the orbital station. The cadets, particularly the aliens, were abuzz with chatter. Several were trying to work out what had just happened. Others debated the structural properties of snow under extreme cold, and a few quietly conceded grudging respect for the human lieutenant. O'Connell exited the shuttle to a mixed reception. His team greeted him with knowing nods and subtle grins. But most of the alien cadets avoided his gaze. Grintok stood at the back of the bay, his gelatinous form practically vibrating with anger. "You exploited something," Grintok growled as O'Connell approached. "There must have been an unreported aid from your suit or external interference. No one survives Xyrix 9 unaided." "Not quite, Professor," O'Connell replied. He pulled off his frost-crusted helmet, revealing a flushed but calm face. "You said no assistance other than the environment. I followed the rules." Grintok's large, reflective eyes narrowed. "Then explain yourself." O'Connell smirked. "It's not magic, Professor. Humans adapted to cold climates long before we had technology to protect us. That little dome? That's something my ancestors perfected thousands of years ago. All I did was replicate it." "That doesn't explain your survival," Grintok snapped. "It's the principle of trapped air," O'Connell said, folding his arms. "The Igloo creates an insulated space, reducing wind exposure and conserving what little heat is left. Sure, it's not comfortable, but it works. And humans? We've got this little thing called grit. We push through." Grintok sneered, but had no immediate rebuttal. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the station's machinery. Several alien cadets exchanged glances, whispering amongst themselves. O'Connell turned to the room, addressing the group. "Look," he said, "I know a lot of you think humans are weak. Maybe we seem that way compared to species who can breathe methane or live in zero gravity without flinching. But strength isn't just about physical resilience. It's about problem-solving, adaptation, and a refusal to quit." "Refusal to quit?" Grintok interjected. "Is that why your kind has stumbled through countless conflicts and wars among yourselves?" O'Connell's smile faded. "We're not perfect, Professor. No species is, but you don't see humans backing down when it counts, do you?" Grintok was about to respond when a new voice cut through the tension. "Enough!" boomed the station's commander, a towering Ilnari with translucent green skin and a reputation for impartiality. "This is a training facility, not a political debate. Lieutenant O'Connell has proven his point, and we have witnessed a practical demonstration of human resourcefulness. Let us move forward." Grintok gave a begrudging nod, though his gelatinous form trembled slightly. The cadets began dispersing, their curiosity satisfied for now. The humans stayed behind, regrouping as O'Connell rejoined them. "Well," Dempsey said, clapping O'Connell on the back, "you certainly made a statement." Brooks looked awestruck. "You weren't kidding about the Igloo thing. Do they really work that well?" "They do if you build them right," O'Connell replied, his tone light, "though I wouldn't recommend testing one without a backup plan." The group chuckled, their camaraderie evident even in the wake of such a tense encounter. Still, O'Connell couldn't help but glance over his shoulder at Grintok, who was already scribbling furiously on a datapad. This wasn't the end of the debate. If anything, it was only the beginning. Grintok would undoubtedly spend the next few weeks finding ways to poke holes in O'Connell's success, both figuratively and, if possible, literally. For now, though, O'Connell had won. As they left the bay, Brooks piped up again. "So, sir, you think they're gonna make this part of the training curriculum?" O'Connell grinned. "Who knows? But if they do, I'll make sure you're the first one to try it out." The humans laughed as they disappeared into the corridor, leaving behind a room full of aliens grappling with an inconvenient truth. Humans were far harder to pin down than they seemed, and for all their supposed weaknesses, they had a knack for thriving in the most unlikely situations. The human contingent settled back into their quarters, their conversations light but purposeful. The challenge on Xyrix 9 had given O'Connell and his team a momentary upper hand in their uneasy relationship with the Coalition's alien races. But none of them believed for a second that it was over. Grintok wasn't the type to let things go. "Mark my words," Dempsey muttered as they filed into the common area. "That squidhead's already plotting a way to tear you down." O'Connell shrugged, dropping into a chair with a sigh. Let him. This wasn't about him anyway. It was about showing them all what we're capable of. "That's all well and good," Brooks said, leaning against a bulkhead. "But Grintok doesn't play fair. You embarrassed him in front of the cadets. He'll come back swinging." "He can swing all he wants," O'Connell replied. "The truth doesn't change. Humans adapt." Before the conversation could continue, the station's comm system chimed, and Commander Vrelik's voice filled the room. "Lieutenant O'Connell, report to the main briefing chamber immediately." The humans exchanged wary glances. Dempsey leaned closer. "You think this is about the Igloo?" "Only one way to find out," O'Connell said, pushing himself to his feet. "Try not to start a mutiny while I'm gone." The others chuckled, though the tension lingered. O'Connell straightened his uniform and made his way to the chamber, the sound of his boots echoing in the quiet halls. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by an unexpected sight. Grintok was there, of course, standing beside a holoprojector with his usual air of superiority. But the room was filled with senior coalition officers, representatives from a dozen species, their forms ranging from insectoid to crystalline. At the head of the table stood Commander Vrelik, his imposing frame dominating the room. "Lieutenant O'Connell," Vrelik said, gesturing for him to step forward. "We've been discussing your demonstration on Xyrix 9. O'Connell approached cautiously. "Sir, while it was unorthodox," Vrelik continued, "it has sparked considerable interest among the Coalition leadership. We are always looking for ways to improve survival training, and your success has raised questions about human methods." Grintok interrupted, his tone sharp. "If I may, Commander, I believe it's premature to draw conclusions from a single event. Lieutenant O'Connell's survival was undoubtedly aided by—" "Enough, Professor," Vrelik said, cutting him off. "The point stands. The humans have something to offer, and we intend to learn from it." O'Connell resisted the urge to smirk. "I'd be happy to share what I know, Commander." Vrelik nodded. "Good, because you'll be leading a joint exercise to test those methods further." The room fell silent. O'Connell blinked, caught off guard. "A joint exercise?" "Yes," Vrelik said. "The Coalition has identified a nearby planet with conditions even harsher than Xyrix 9. Your task will be to survive there for 24 hours with a mixed team of humans and alien cadets. No advanced tools or equipment, only what the environment provides." Grintok's eyes gleamed with thinly veiled satisfaction. "An excellent proposal, Commander. I'm sure Lieutenant O'Connell's methods will face a true test this time." O'Connell met Grintok's gaze without flinching. "I accept." The briefing continued with details about the planet, designated RX-479. It was a barren wasteland of jagged ice and volcanic vents, with temperatures swinging wildly between searing heat and freezing cold. The challenge would push every participant to their limits, and O'Connell knew that was exactly the point. By the time the meeting adjourned, the gravity of the situation had fully set in. Back in the humans' quarters, O'Connell explained the mission to his team. Brooks looked pale. "RX-479, he said. "That place makes a Xyrix 9 look like a vacation resort." "That's why it's perfect," O'Connell said. "We're not just proving ourselves this time. We're proving human survival strategies to the Coalition. And if we fail? Dempsey asked. We don't fail, O'Connell said firmly. You know that. The preparation for the mission was minimal by design. Each participant was allowed only basic survival gear, thermal suits, a multi-tool, and a single ration pack. The rest would depend on their ability to work together and improvise. On the day of the exercise, O'Connell found himself standing at the edge of the shuttle bay with his assigned team. 2 humans, including Brooks, and 3 alien cadets. One was a towering rhinoc with thick, leathery skin. Another was a spindly Zatar, whose translucent exoskeleton shimmered under the station's lights. The last, a squat Krillin, grunted impatiently as the group awaited final instructions. "This'll be interesting," Dempsey muttered as he watched from the observation deck. "Understatement of the year," O'Connell replied under his breath. The shuttle descended toward RX-479, its engines struggling against the planet's violent winds. The team landed in a desolate expanse of jagged terrain, the air so thin it barely registered on their suit monitors. O'Connell took a deep breath, his mind already working through the plan. "All right," he said, addressing the group. "We've got 24 hours to survive and make it back to the extraction point. The first priority is shelter. Let's move." The Zatar hissed skeptically. "Humans in their shelters. Do you intend to build another ice dome?" "If we have to," O'Connell said. "Unless you've got a better idea." The Rennick grunted. "We'll see if your tricks hold up here." O'Connell ignored the jab, scanning the landscape for materials. The conditions were brutal, but he'd faced worse. As the group set to work, he couldn't help but notice the tension between species. Trust would be as critical as ingenuity if they were going to succeed, and O'Connell had no intention of letting them fail. The team worked in uneasy silence as they scoured the icy wasteland of RX-479 for resources. The terrain was a mix of frozen, jagged ridges and steaming vents that spewed superheated gases. O'Connell knew time was their greatest enemy. The volatile weather patterns could shift in moments, and shelter was the only way they'd last through the night. The Rhinoc cadet, Vorlock, hefted a large slab of ice. "This is pointless. Your shelter won't stand a chance against the thermal surges." O'Connell didn't look up. "It will if we work together. Stack those pieces over here." Vorlock grumbled but complied, dragging the ice into the growing pile. Meanwhile, Brooks was digging a trench, his breath coming in visible puffs as the thin atmosphere pushed his endurance. The Zatar, Kliss, hovered nearby, her translucent body vibrating with barely concealed skepticism. "You humans waste time with crude construction," Kliss said. "The Krillin and I could dig into the ice and use the vents for warmth." "And get cooked when the vents spike to 1,000 degrees? O'Connell shot back. "No thanks. We stick to the plan." The Krillin rock let out a guttural chuckle. "Humans and their plans. Let's hope yours is better than your species' reputation." O'Connell ignored the jab and focused on building a hybrid shelter using blocks of ice reinforced with frozen volcanic ash they found nearby. It wasn't elegant, but it would insulate against the cold and deflect the worst of the heat. The others grumbled but followed his lead, grudgingly contributing their strength and unique abilities to the project. By the time the shelter was complete, the sky had darkened and the temperature plummeted. Inside, the team huddled in the cramped space, the walls glowing faintly from the trapped heat of the ash. Brooks looked at O'Connell. "Think it'll hold?" "It'll hold," O'Connell said, though he wasn't entirely sure. "But we'll need to rotate watches. This planet doesn't play fair." The first few hours passed in tense silence, interrupted only by the howling winds outside. Vorlock took the first watch, his massive frame barely fitting in the shelter's entryway. Brooks dozed off, exhausted from the day's effort, while Kliss and Rock whispered in their native tongues, casting doubtful glances at O'Connell. As O'Connell rested, he couldn't shake the feeling that the exercise was more than just a test of survival. Grintock's smug face haunted his thoughts. This wasn't just about proving human resilience. It was about proving the value of working together, no matter how different they were. If they couldn't survive as a team, they wouldn't stand a chance in real combat scenarios. Suddenly, Vorlock's growl jolted everyone awake. "Something's wrong!" O'Connell scrambled to the entryway and peered outside. The horizon glowed an ominous orange, and the ground beneath them rumbled. A thermal surge was coming, a massive eruption of heat and gas from the planet's volatile crust. "Get back inside," O'Connell barked, pulling Vorlok into the shelter. "Brace the walls." The team scrambled into action, reinforcing the shelter's interior with whatever they could grab. The surge hit moments later, a wave of scorching heat that rattled the structure and sent cracks spidering through the ice. The temperature soared, and the air grew thick with steam. "We're not going to make it," Kliss hissed, her voice rising in panic. "Yes, we are," O'Connell shouted, shoving a slab of ice against a growing crack. "Hold the line." Vorlok and Rock worked furiously alongside him, their earlier doubts forgotten in the face of survival. Even Kliss joined in, her spindly limbs surprisingly adept at reinforcing the walls with smaller chunks of ice. Brooks manned the center, distributing tools and calling out instructions. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually the surge passed. The temperature dropped sharply, and the shelter groaned but held. O'Connell collapsed against the wall, his chest heaving as the adrenaline subsided. "Still think humans are weak?" he said, looking pointedly at Vorlok. The Rinnoc grunted, a faint glimmer of respect in his eyes. "You got lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Brooks said, grinning despite his exhaustion. "This guy's just stubborn." The team shared a brief laugh, the tension breaking for the first time since they'd landed. O'Connell allowed himself a small smile, but quickly turned serious again. "We've still got a long way to go. Rest up while you can." The rest of the night passed without incident, and by morning, the team had not only survived but grown into a cohesive unit. When the extraction shuttle arrived, they worked together to dismantle the shelter and leave the site as intact as possible, a testament to their shared effort. Back aboard the station, Grintok awaited them, his expression inscrutable. As the team stepped off the shuttle, he approached O'Connell, his tentacles twitching. "Well," Grintok said, his tone dripping with skepticism, "did you learn anything useful?" O'Connell met his gaze evenly. "I learned that survival isn't about strength or intelligence alone. It's about finding common ground and using every resource, including each other." Grintok scoffed but said nothing. Commander Vrylik stepped forward, addressing the gathered cadets. "Let this exercise serve as a lesson to all of you. The strength of the coalition lies in unity. If this team can work together on RX-479, so can the rest of us." The room erupted in applause, though Grintok quietly slithered away. O'Connell's team exchanged nods, their bond forged in the fires and ice of RX-479. For the humans, it was a victory far greater than survival. It was proof that their place in the coalition wasn't just earned, it was deserved.